There are 10 big ideas that can help make you a far better leader. In this episode of the Change Your Minds podcast, I'm going to be walking you through 10 more big ideas, which are all to do with becoming a more effective leader. Here we'll explore ideas from Brené Brown, Patrick Lencioni, Simon Sinek, Jim Collins, Kim Scott. We'll cover a broad range of different ideas that all come from big idea books in the area of leadership. If you're a leader, this one is for you. Looking forward to seeing you inside. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. My name is Patrick, and today we're going to be talking about leadership. And in particular, I want to talk you through 10 big ideas that can help you to become a much better leader. We're going to walk through each of these ideas, and I'm going to introduce you to the books where these ideas came from. And therefore, at the end of this episode, you get the chance to be able to go away and start to look. I'll make sure that all of the links for the books are in the show notes, but you've the chance to be able to dive into these, because every book, as usual with this series, every book that I talk about has got so much more than just a big idea. So I highly recommend getting your hands on it and starting to dig deep into it. And we're going to start with the first book, which is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Now, Brené Brown has written a number of wonderful books about the gift of imperfection and Daring Greatly, which is another amazing book. And Dare to Lead is taking her main thesis, her main idea around the importance of embracing vulnerability and applying it to leadership. The main concept that Brené talks about is that vulnerability is not weakness. It is actually a great measure of courage. And the key is that you cannot innovate or lead if you're armored up to protect yourself from any sort of shame or failure or mistakes. Brené argues that in order for you to truly become a great leader, you need to be able to come fully 100% to the table yourself. And that means letting people see that you don't always have everything perfect. The more that you can bring your whole self to the table, the more you can have the courage to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there, the more likely you are to win over other people, as well as to make a real lasting impact. So often people playing politics and playing games to try to ensure that they position themselves in exactly perfect the right way. And this never necessarily leads where we think it should or could. So it's critical that we show up and we're being as vulnerable as possible. So again, this core idea is if you want to be a more successful leader, you've got to embrace being vulnerable. And again, check out Dare to Lead to explore more on exactly how you can do that. The second big idea is to start with why. And this comes from Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek did a viral TED Talk many years ago, and it was entitled How Great Leaders Inspire Action, or something along those lines, or what great leaders do to inspire action, something like that. And he talked about the golden circle, where he drew three sort of circles, one inside the other, and in the middle he put why, and then how, and then what. And he said most people, most leaders tend to start with, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is why we're going to do it. But he said true leaders that inspire action start with why. So he argues that the key is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And great leaders inspire action by communicating the purpose why first, before the process, which is the how, and then the product, which is the what. And so this whole notion of starting from why is really a very powerful insight, because once again, as a leader, if you truly want to, let's imagine, implement change, the key is to be able to give people the why behind the change first. You're not telling them, this is what we're going to do differently, this is how we're going to do it differently, this is why. Instead, Sinek would argue that you start off with the why we're doing it differently, first of all, how we're going to do it differently moving forward, and this is what it looks like in actual fact. So certainly this notion of starting with why is a particularly powerful idea. Again, check out his TED Talk video, which again is viral, and also check out the book Start With Why for more information about that core idea. Third idea we have to talk about is actually seems like a multitude of different ideas. It's known as the 5 dysfunctions of teams. And this comes from Patrick Lencioni, one of the top experts out there in terms of building great teams. And Lencioni talks about his big ideas really about the root cause of team failure is absence of trust. And really, when you lose trust in a team, and we've another episode that we've done about trust earlier. But when you lose trust in a team, and he really talks about vulnerability-based trust, so connecting there with the Brené Brown stuff. But without the safety to be vulnerable, teams devolve into artificial harmony, and everyone pretends to be, on board, but nobody really fully is. So therefore, it's a lack of commitment. So its 5 dysfunctions are absence of trust, which then leads to a fear of conflict. People are afraid to sort of say what they really think. That means that no one's really fully committed. There's a lack of commitment. Then people avoid accountability, avoid ownership, and therefore there's an inattention to results. So those 5 dysfunctions, one affects the other, and therefore the core idea is that absence of trust is the most important thing that we need to eradicate. And that's what Lencioni's big idea is. Again, definitely recommend checking out the book. Lots of great stuff in there as you walk through the framework. Big idea number 4 is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Lencioni. This particular book, what you'll notice extreme ownership really looks at is the importance of ensuring that there is no bad teams, only bad leaders. And it's all about taking accountability and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, this is my fault. The reason why we're not getting the result is down to me. And the idea there that is sort of argued from Jocko is that it's blaming other people acts as a protective mechanism which saves your own ego, but it destroys your ability to solve problems. But when you take accountability for it and you decide, this is the only way, this is on me, what do I need to do? This notion of extreme ownership could be a game changer. And once again, this isn't playing in an area of, well, whose fault is it really, right? We're not getting into the judgmental trap where we go, who's to blame for this? We're just going, if I take full accountability and responsibility for this, then I have a lot more control, I have a lot more agency over what occurs. And so therefore, it's critical for us to recognize the power of extreme ownership as a concept. Again, another great book to check out. The next big idea is from the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And this notion is to lead well, you need to be able to care personally as well as challenge directly. So you need to be better at giving feedback. Feedback is a moral obligation, according to Scott. What she talks about is the reason why most leaders fail when they give feedback is they either fall into the trap of what she calls ruinous empathy, where they are too nice and therefore it's not very useful, right? Because they're so caring and so empathetic that they're not actually getting to the point, for instance, or obnoxious aggression where you're just being straight up. So you're demonstrating a lot of candor, but not necessarily demonstrating any empathy whatsoever. And so Kim Scott would recommend that the key is that you need to have a perfect balance where you're ensuring that you are radically honest, but at the same time in a way that considers the other person's feelings. And again, when you go in and dive into the book, it really helps you to become a master at giving feedback. Definitely recommended from a feedback perspective. There's also Good to Great by Jim Collins. This is a classic book. Lots of different ideas, lots of different frameworks in this. The big idea is that greatness is something that you can consciously choose. It's a case of discipline. The best leaders aren't necessarily charismatic celebrities. They tend to be what he calls level 5 leaders, right? The executives that are a paradoxical mix of personal humility and strong professional will. And that paradoxical mix means on the one hand, you demonstrate humility. On the other hand, you're very forthright and forthcoming in terms of you're very determined in the way in which you pursue goals and in the way in which you hold yourself and your teams accountable. When things are going wrong, you tend to look in the mirror. And when things are going right, you tend to look out the window. That's the phrasing. If you look at Extreme Ownership by Jocko, this notion of taking ownership, definitely I think that aligns with it's at least part of this notion that Jim Collins would discuss. And he talks about other aspects and elements in the book, like the Stockdale paradox and the importance of, this is based upon James Stockdale, who was in prison for 7.5 years and was, demonstrated an incredible ability to look at the brutal truth, to be brutally honest with himself, but at the same time remain strong and determined and resilient and demonstrated a great will. He talks about the hedgehog concept, and this is the notion of the hedgehog versus the fox, and the fox is running about scattered attention all the way through, whereas the hedgehog only has to do one thing well, which is retreat into its shell, and it's safe. And therefore, he talks about the best leaders tend to be really good at this. They focus on one thing. So you need to understand, well, what are you passionate about? What are you best in the world in? And what drives your economic engine? And by understanding where those three sort of converge, you then decide on what you're going to lock into and focus in on to the best of your ability. And there's lots of other great frameworks in there. It's definitely one of the classic books, good to great. But again, what makes you a great leader is largely about being able to bring humility to the table, but being unstoppable at the same time. The rest of the big ideas that we're going to talk about all come from the work of Ryan Holiday. And in particular, on some of the other big idea episodes, we'll talk about some of Ryan's other books. But Ryan talks about 4 different virtues, right? And Ryan Holiday is known as being one of the top writers out there in the space of Stoicism, right? And he's written a number of excellent books, great, easy to read books, lots of great stories. In his latest series, he talked about 4 virtues. And one of these virtues is courage is calling. So the importance of courage. And according to Holiday, courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite fear. In fact, fear is a compass. It points you towards the thing you must do. So when you feel scared of something, that may well be the signal to suggest that it's important for you to take on this challenge. And in many ways, whenever we take on a challenge, if it scares us, that's almost a good thing, because once again, whenever we feel that fear, it gives us the requisite level of, okay, this is going to really test me. This is going to really challenge me. And it gives us the, let's say, the dragon, the monster to overcome in many ways. So this notion of fear being a compass pointing you towards the thing that you absolutely must do is a particularly useful and important sort of idea or notion. So Courage is Calling, great book. And again, tells the book with lots of great stories, as he does in many of the other things. And he draws from these as sort of Stoic principles, right, of demonstrating virtue in different ways. Discipline is Destiny is another of his books on the virtues. So this is really about self-discipline. It's not about punishment. It's about self-respect expressed over time. I really love that reframe. And it predicts sort of freedom. And it's really about having control or mastery over our lower impulses so we can liberate our highest potential. So it's a nice little reframe. When you start to see discipline not as like punishment, because sometimes, honestly, when I'm disciplined to go for a run or disciplined to do the things that I need to do, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is torture. But actually, you're demonstrating self-respect. And when you're doing that, you're expressing it over time. So the things that you do today will lead you towards getting the results that you want tomorrow. And so the ability that discipline has to be able to predict freedom, discipline leads to freedom. It's a really nice way of thinking about it. And again, highly recommend diving into that book. We also have Right Thing, Right Now, another one of the books of the virtues by Ryan Holiday. And this notion is, this big idea is that justice is virtue turned outward. And this is about doing what's fair and pro-social now, not later when it's convenient. And one of the things that Ryan talks about a lot is sometimes people assume that someone who is, inverted commas, stoic is just someone who's got no emotions. But actually, Stoics through history do have emotions and do believe in things and have political perspectives and points of view and do try to advocate for a way of living or a way of ruling or a way of being. And so the notion of right thing right now is, do you have, and again, connected with courage, do you have the courage of your convictions? Will you stand up for the right thing now, not when it's convenient? Do you wait for everyone else to come on board or everyone else to say a particular thing before you will say what your thoughts or beliefs are? Or are you going to say it right now? Are you going to demonstrate that? And that is one of the virtuous skills to work on is, will you speak out when it's not popular? Will you talk about what you believe in when necessarily you might not get rewarded socially for doing so? So a powerful book there, Right Thing, Right Now. And then there's also Wisdom Takes Work. And Wisdom is the 4th book in the series on the virtues. This is about wisdom being more like a practice loop. It's about learning something, then applying something, then reflecting on something. It's not just about taking in the information. It's also about applying it. It's about reflecting on it. It's not just something that arrives when you get older, you get wiser. You can actually get less wise as you get older, if you become more certain in your perspectives. And the key is to work on a small number of ideas daily in life. That's what helps you to become more wise. It's not about, scattering all your attention over things. Wisdom is something that you cultivate, once again, by practice and applying and reflection. And in many ways, that's what I hope that you will do in terms of these big idea series, is that as you look through the big ideas behind leadership or successful leaders, or the big ideas behind other areas of your life, the key is to not just think about them as in terms of, okay, I'm going to read all these books, but take one of the books, take Dare to Lead, for instance, and start to learn the information, the main insights that Brené shares, and then go, okay, how can I apply this? And then once you've decided how you're going to apply what Brené teaches you, then reflect on it. How did that go? What did I like? What didn't I like? How can I become more effective at this? So do the same thing in terms of extreme ownership or 5 dysfunctions of a team. As a leader, if you can start to remember that vulnerability is not weakness, it's actually your greatest measure of courage. If you can remember that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So start from why, then go to how, then go to what. If you can remember that the root cause of team failure is the absence of trust, and you can cultivate trust in your team and prioritize it as the most important element. If you can take extreme ownership where you hold yourself accountable for the results of your team. If you can demonstrate radical candor by delivering feedback that is very honest, but also caring. If you can move your company, organization, or team from good to great, so you can start to work on becoming a level 5 leader and demonstrating a paradoxical mix of personal humility and professional will. If you can understand the importance of courage as something that's calling you to be able to see fear as an indication as to what challenges to take on. Recognizing discipline is actually self-respect expressed over time, which will help you to improve. Always ensure that you're doing the right thing at the right time, and also becoming wiser by studying, by applying, and by reflecting on what you've done. Then you will find yourself becoming significantly better as a leader. So I hope you found this useful. I wanted to walk you through some of the most important and most powerful books out there on becoming a better leader. For now, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. Take care. May the force as always be with you. And I'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye-bye.